HOA fined me $20,000 for hoarding water. Yes, $20,000. All because they said I was keeping too much water on my own property. At first, I laughed, then I argued, but nothing worked. So one night, I walked to the edge of my land, stood before the old dam, and pulled the lever. And when the gates opened, the whole neighborhood changed forever. Suspense pause, music rises, cut to dramatic visuals. Welcome, my friends, to HOA Max Stories, where I share the real drama between homeowners and those powerful HOA boards. My name's Robert, I'm just a regular homeowner in the US, lived in the same neighborhood for over 20 years, and trust me, I've seen it all. From petty fines to outrageous rules. I've fought battles you wouldn't believe. And today, I'm bringing you one of the wildest stories yet. But before we dive in, do me a favor, if you're over 50 like most of my neighbors, hit that subscribe button. Think of it like sharing a good story at the coffee shop, only this time, it helps me keep telling these HOA tales. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this HOA madness has reached. So, let me take you back to that moment. I had just told you how the HOA fined me $20,000 for something as simple as storing water, and how I pulled the lever of the old dam. But before I get to that night, you need to know how it all really began. It was a normal Tuesday morning, the kind of morning when the world feels slow and calm. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, looking out the window at my quiet street. The mail was already in the box, but I noticed something different. A plain white envelope slipped right under my door. No stamps, no marks, just cold silence. I bent down, picked it up, and felt my heart beat a little faster. I opened it, and there it was. A fine. Not just a fine, but $20,000. $20,000 for hoarding water. I sat there staring at those words, reading them again and again. Hoarding water? What on earth did that mean? I wasn't running a factory. I wasn't stealing from anyone. I had nothing but a few barrels in my backyard, catching rain whenever the clouds decided to bless us. With the drought we were living through, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was being responsible. But to the HOA, I was breaking the rules. At first, I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Who fines a man $20,000 for collecting rain? But the more I read that letter, the less funny it became. It was real. It was official. And it had a deadline stamped in bold letters. 30 days. Pay or face consequences. I called the number listed at the bottom. My hands were shaking. A woman answered with a flat, cold tone. HOA office. How can I help you? I explained myself, told her this had to be a mistake, told her I wasn't hoarding anything. She paused, almost like she was reading from a script, then said, "Sir, violation of Section 14C. Unauthorized storage of water. The fine stands. 30 days. And then, she hung up. That was it. No discussion. No chance to explain. Just a number and a threat. I stood there, phone in my hand, my chest heavy, thinking, what kind of world am I living in, where saving rain is a crime? That night, I barely slept. My mind kept racing. $20,000, that was more than half of what I made in a year. How was I supposed to pay that? What would I tell my family? The next day, I went to the HOA meeting. I was determined to fight. The room was full, neighbors whispering, the board sitting tall at the front. I walked up, letter in hand, and spoke into the microphone. This is wrong, you can't fine me for collecting rainwater. I'm not a criminal. I'm not hurting anyone. For a moment, silence. Some people nodded quietly. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would listen. But then Clark, the HOA president, leaned forward with that smug grin. Rules are rules, he said. If we let one man hoard water, soon everyone will. And then what? Chaos. Chaos, that's what he called it. Me saving a little rain was chaos. The board voted right then and there. The fine would stay. $20,000. Pay or else. I walked out of that meeting with fire in my chest. I had never felt so small, so powerless, yet so angry. I thought about all the years I had followed every single ridiculous rule. Painting my mailbox the right color. Cutting my grass exactly the right height. Moving my trash bins because they didn't like where I left them. I had done it all, and still, they came after me. It wasn't about water anymore. It was about control. I went home that night, sat in my chair, and stared at that fine lying on my table. My hands clenched. My teeth tight. And then, my eyes drifted to the old photo on the wall. It was me, standing at the dam at the edge of my property. That dam had been there longer than I had. Old concrete. Worn down. Forgotten by most. But I never forgot. I knew how strong it was. I knew how much water it held back. And that's when the thought came to me. What if I stopped fighting them with words, and let the water speak instead? I didn't act right away. No, I let the idea sit in my mind, growing like a seed. Every day that passed, every glare from the board, every whisper from the neighbors, every sleepless night, that seed grew. By the time the storm rolled in, and the dam filled higher than ever before, I knew what I was going to do. I knew. I wasn't going to pay their fine. I was going to pay them back. But before I tell you exactly what happened that night, let me ask you something. If your HOA fined you $20,000 for saving rainwater, would you fight them in court? Would you pay them quietly? Or would you do what I did? Tell me in the comments, because I really want to know what you would have done. The storm came in fast, darker clouds than I had seen in years, lightning flashing across the sky, thunder shaking the ground. People in the neighborhood ran inside, shutting their windows, pulling in their chairs and plants. Everyone was worried about their lawns, about their roofs leaking, but me? I was thinking about something else. The dam. I could hear the rain pounding against my roof, pouring down the gutters, racing through the streets. My barrels filled up quickly, too quickly. The water overflowed, spilling onto the ground, running toward the old drain at the edge of my yard. And still, the rain kept coming. I grabbed my jacket, stepped outside, and walked to the edge of my property. In the distance, behind the trees, I could see it, the dam. The old concrete wall was trembling with the weight of water building behind it. The storm was feeding it faster than I had ever seen before. My heart pounded in my chest. I thought about Clark, the smug HOA president, sitting in his dry, warm house, probably sipping wine, proud of himself for making me the villain. I thought about the woman at the HOA office, her cold voice saying, "The fine stands." I thought about the neighbors who looked at me like I was a criminal. The rain kept pouring. I walked closer, my shoes sinking in the wet ground. The dam roared like a beast in chains, holding back thousands and thousands of gallons of water. And there I was, standing in the dark, staring at it, my hands shaking as I touched the cold, rusty lever. I didn't pull it that night. Not yet. But I knew I could. The idea burned in my mind. The next morning, the sun came back out, bright and calm, almost pretending like nothing had happened. But the ground was still soaked, the dam still heavy with water. The storm had done its job, and now, every time I looked at that fine on my table, I thought about the power I held just down the hill. The HOA sent another notice that day. This time, it wasn't just a fine. It was a threat. Failure to pay will result in legal action. I laughed when I read it. A cold, empty laugh. Legal action. Lawyers. Courtrooms. All of that cost money I didn't have. They wanted to break me, bleed me dry, and make an example of me. That evening, I walked through the neighborhood. People avoided my eyes. Some whispered as I passed. Kids pointed at me, their parents pulling them back inside. I had become a ghost in my own town, a warning sign of what happens when you stand up to the HOA. I tried to talk to a few neighbors. Some nodded with sympathy, but their voices were low. "Sorry, man. I can't get involved." Others shook their heads and told me I should just pay. One woman even told me, "You brought this on yourself." That night, I sat on my porch, staring at the street. The air was still damp, the smell of rain still fresh. I could see the glow of Clark's house across the way. He had lights strung up on his porch, glowing warm and bright, like he was celebrating something. Maybe he was. Maybe he was celebrating crushing me. And that's when it hit me. The HOA wanted me small. They wanted me broken. They wanted me silent. But the dam was waiting. The next week dragged on like a heavy weight. More letters. More warnings. Threats piling up. My phone rang constantly with numbers I didn't recognize: lawyers, collectors, people demanding money I didn't have. I ignored them. Instead, I kept walking to the dam. Every day. Standing there, looking at the lever, listening to the water roar behind the wall. Each time, I stood a little longer. Each time, the idea grew stronger. It wasn't about water anymore. It wasn't about money. It was about freedom. And the dam was my freedom. One night, as I stood there in the moonlight, I ran my hand over the old steel. Rust flaked off under my fingers. The sound of rushing water echoed in my ears. My reflection stared back at me from a small pool near the base, my eyes dark, my face tired. I whispered to myself. They wanted to drown me in fines, maybe it's time they drown in something real. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was reckless. But the anger in me had grown too strong. The injustice, the humiliation, the way they stripped me of my dignity, it left me with only one choice. Or at least, that's how it felt. The following day, Clark himself came to my door. He didn't knock politely. He pounded, loud enough for the whole street to hear. I opened the door slowly, letter still in my hand. He didn't wait. He shoved a paper into my chest. "Final notice," he said, his grin wide. "You've got 2 weeks. After that, we take your house." My house. I stood there, silent, as he turned and walked back to his car. Neighbors peeked out their windows, watching. Some of them even smiled. 2 weeks. 2 weeks before they would strip me of everything I owned. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sound of rushing water echoing in my head even though I was miles away. And finally, just before sunrise, I made up my mind. I was going to pull the lever. I was going to let the water decide who really had the power. But here's what I want to ask you. If someone threatened to take your home, the place you worked your whole life for, would you bow your head and give it up quietly, or would you fight back in the most unforgettable way possible? I didn't wake up that morning the same man I was the night before. Something inside me had changed. For weeks, I had tried to play fair, tried to reason, tried to fight with words, tried to hold on to some hope that maybe justice existed in that neighborhood. But after Clark stood on my porch and told me they would take my house, the last piece of me that cared about their rules was gone. Now, I wasn't thinking about letters, or meetings, or lawyers. I was thinking about the dam. That old wall of concrete, holding back a monster of water, a monster that could wash away everything the HOA thought they controlled. I walked out back, the morning air heavy and still. My yard was wet from another night of rain. The barrels overflowed again, streams of water cutting little paths through the grass. I looked at them, my so-called crime, and I laughed. A bitter, broken laugh. I grabbed my jacket, stuffed the fine into my pocket, and headed down the path through the trees. The dam stood tall in the distance, the sound of rushing water louder with every step. My boots sank into the mud, my hands clenched tighter with each breath. When I reached it, I stopped. I stared at the lever, that old, rusty handle that controlled everything. It looked small, almost fragile, but I knew the truth. That lever could change everything in a second. I ran my hand over the cold metal, closed my eyes, and listened. The water behind the dam roared like a caged beast, angry, waiting, hungry to break free. And in that moment, I thought, maybe I wasn't the villain here. Maybe I was the only one willing to show them how fragile their power really was. That day, I started planning. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't write it down. It was all in my head, turning, twisting, growing like a fire. I imagined the streets filled with water, Clark's porch swallowed, the HOA office drowned in the very thing they tried to punish me for. But revenge alone wasn't enough. I wanted to make sure they understood why. So, I made copies of the fine. I nailed one to a post near the dam, where anyone walking by could see it. I slipped another into the mailbox of a neighbor I trusted, a quiet old man who never spoke much, but always gave me a nod when we crossed paths. And I taped another copy right to my own front door, so the board could see it every time they drove past. This is what you did, I thought. This is what you made me. That week dragged on. The HOA sent me more letters, more threats. Neighbors whispered more loudly now, pointing when they thought I couldn't hear. Kids rode by on bikes, chanting "water hoarder" under their breath. I didn't react. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. Because I knew something they didn't. The storm forecast said heavy rain was coming again, stronger than before. The dam was already full, and when that storm hit, it would be overflowing. That night, I stood at my window, watching the sky flash with lightning in the distance. My heart pounded, my breath heavy. I knew the time was close. The storm rolled in by midnight. Rain hammered the roof, the gutters screamed under the weight, and the sound of water rushing filled the air like a song of war. I pulled on my boots, my jacket, and stepped out into the storm. The path to the dam was darker than ever, the trees swaying violently, branches snapping, rain hitting my face like needles. Every step felt heavier, like the earth itself was trying to hold me back. But I kept going. When I reached the dam, I froze. The water was higher than I had ever seen it, waves crashing against the wall, spraying up into the stormy air. The roar was deafening. And there, the lever, waiting for my hand. I stood there, rain pouring down my face, thunder shaking the ground, lightning painting the world white for brief seconds at a time. My hand shook as I reached out. I gripped the lever, cold and wet under my fingers. I pulled slightly, just enough to feel it shift, and the sound of rushing water grew even louder. I stopped. My chest was pounding. My head filled with voices. Part of me screamed, "Do it! Make them feel it!" Another part whispered, "This is too far, once you do this, there's no going back." I stood there in the storm, fighting myself, torn between fury and fear. And that's when I saw it. A flashlight in the distance. Someone was coming. I ducked behind the wall, heart racing, breath caught in my throat. The light moved closer, bouncing with each step. I heard footsteps splashing in the mud. Then a voice. It was the old man, the quiet neighbor I had slipped the letter to. "Son, what are you doing out here?" His voice was calm, almost too calm. I stepped out slowly, the rain pouring between us. He shined the light on me, then on the lever. His eyes narrowed. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" he said. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He sighed. "They broke you down, didn't they? I know that feeling, they did it to me years ago. Took my shed, fined me for my own tools. They're not fair people." For a moment, I thought he would stop me. Call the police. Run to the board. But instead, he nodded slowly. "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. Sometimes, the only way to show power is to let go of what you're holding back." And then, he turned and walked away. His flashlight disappeared into the rain, leaving me alone again. I stood there for what felt like hours, my hand still gripping the lever, my mind screaming with questions. Was I about to become the man who destroyed his own neighborhood? Or the man who finally stood up to the HOA in the only way they'd understand? And now, I want to ask you. If you were standing in the storm, your hand on that lever, with the chance to unleash everything they feared most, would you pull it, or would you walk away? The storm didn't let up that night. The rain kept pounding the earth like it wanted to bury the whole neighborhood, thunder roared, lightning cracked across the sky, and the dam shivered under the weight of water pressing against it. I stood there, hands still gripping that cold, rusty lever, my heart racing faster than the storm itself. The old man's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes, the only way to show power is to let go of what you're holding back. I stared into the black water, waves slamming against the concrete wall, spraying mist into my face. My fingers tightened. The lever squealed as I pulled it an inch further. Just that little movement made the ground tremble under my feet. A growl of water slipped through the gate, spilling out with a force that made my chest shake. And for the first time, I felt it. The power. Not the kind of power the HOA used with letters and threats, but real power. Power that could not be ignored. Power that could not be voted against in some meeting room. The rain hit harder. The dam moaned. The gate shook in my hands. My teeth clenched, my breath came faster, my mind racing. Should I do it? Should I end it all right here? I pulled harder, the gate creaked, and then, suddenly, a jet of water exploded out. It crashed down the hill, cutting through the mud like a wild animal set free. My ears rang with the roar. And just like that, I froze. Because I knew, if I opened it all the way, there would be no turning back. I let go. The lever snapped back into place with a loud clang. The dam groaned, but it held. I fell to my knees, soaked in rain, chest heaving. My mind was spinning, my body shaking. I had come so close to unleashing everything. But I hadn't. Not yet. I stumbled back home that night, drenched and broken. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm pass. But sleep never came. Only thoughts. Only anger. Only visions of Clark's smirk, the board's laughter, the neighbors' whispers. The next morning, the sky cleared. The neighborhood looked fresh, clean, like the storm had washed away the world. But inside me, the storm was still raging. And then, it got worse. Another letter. Another fine. Another reminder that the HOA wasn't going to stop. This time, the letter said I had 2 weeks before legal action. They would put a lien on my house. They would take everything I had worked for. Something snapped in me again. I crumpled the letter in my fist and walked straight out to the backyard. My eyes locked on the barrels, overflowing with rainwater. The very things that had caused all of this. I kicked them over, water spilling into the dirt. You want water? I whispered to myself, my voice shaking. Then you'll get it. That night, I walked the neighborhood streets, watching the quiet houses. Porch lights glowed warmly, curtains pulled tight, families inside eating dinners, laughing, safe. Safe, because they followed the rules. Safe, because they had bowed their heads and paid their dues. And here I was, the outcast. The example. I couldn't take it anymore. By midnight, I was back at the dam. The moonlight shimmered across the water's surface, making it glow like silver fire. The roar of the reservoir was deafening now, pressing harder than ever. I stood at the gate, my hand back on the lever. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled. The first gate opened with a screech that echoed into the night. Water burst out in a violent stream, crashing down into the valley below. I pulled harder. Another section gave way. The sound was thunder on top of thunder. The ground shook under my boots. The water rushed out like it had been waiting for me all along. It carved through the land, running fast and wild, down toward the very streets where those houses stood. I could see it from the top. The water turning the roads into rivers. Yards vanishing under the current. Cars lifting, sliding, spinning like toys. And the screams, faint at first, then louder. Lights flicked on in windows. Doors burst open. People ran out, yelling, pointing, panicking as the water poured in. I stood there, my heart pounding, my breath ragged, watching it all unfold like a nightmare I had painted myself. And in that chaos, one thought burned in my mind. Now you know, what it feels like. The HOA's power was gone. Their rules meant nothing against the flood. Their meetings, their fines, their threats, drowned by the roar of water. But as I stood there, drenched in rain and moonlight, a question twisted inside me. Was I finally free, or had I just become the monster they always claimed I was? And now, I want to ask you. If you were standing where I was, watching your whole neighborhood drown because of your hand, would you feel justice, or would you feel guilt? The sound of rushing water filled the night. It was louder than thunder, louder than my own heartbeat, like the earth itself had cracked open. I stood there on the ridge, rain dripping from my hair, my clothes heavy and soaked, staring down at the neighborhood below. The streets had turned into rivers. The water twisted and curled between houses, climbing higher with every second. Cars floated like toys, bumping into each other, alarms screaming before being swallowed by the current. People were running, their voices echoing in panic, carrying through the storm. Some shouted names, some screamed for help, some just stood frozen, watching everything they owned wash away. And there I was, standing in the shadows, the only one who knew why the flood had come. The water reflected the glow of porch lights and street lamps, flickering like candles fighting for life. I saw fences breaking, sheds collapsing, yards swallowed whole. The neat little lawns the HOA loved so much, gone in seconds. Clark's house was one of the first hit. His perfectly painted porch, the pride of his life, disappeared under a wave that smashed through his fence and tore up the wooden steps. I could almost hear him shouting from inside, his voice lost in the roar of water. For a moment, I felt something dark. Satisfaction. Revenge. A twisted sense of balance. But then, I saw a child. A small figure clinging to the top of a car as the current pushed it down the street. Their tiny arms flailed, their voice shrill with fear. A man splashed through the water, trying to reach them, but the current was too strong. My chest tightened. My throat closed. What had I done? I gripped the rail of the dam, my knuckles white, my stomach sick. The water kept pouring, rushing, tearing through everything, and there was no way to stop it now. The screams grew louder. People climbed onto rooftops, waving flashlights, shouting into the storm. Dogs barked from cages half submerged. The world below was chaos, pure chaos. And still, I stood there, frozen. The dam trembled beneath my feet, water surging out like a beast that had finally been freed. I thought about the fine, about the board meetings, about Clark's grin when he handed me that final notice. I thought about every humiliation, every insult, every rule. This was their punishment. But was it also mine? Hours seemed to pass, though it was only minutes. By the time the rain slowed and the clouds began to break, the neighborhood was unrecognizable. Streets gone. Lawns erased. Houses broken, waterlogged, and dark. The screams had quieted, replaced by silence, heavy and haunting. I turned and walked back home, my legs weak, my body shaking. My house sat on higher ground, safe from the flood. When I stepped inside, I was met with silence. My furniture untouched, my floors dry. But inside me, nothing was dry. My mind raced with images of what I had seen. The child on the car. The neighbors on rooftops. The look of fear in every window. I collapsed into my chair, dripping water onto the floor, and buried my face in my hands. What had I done? The sun rose slowly the next morning. The storm was gone, leaving behind a quiet that felt unnatural. I opened my door and stepped outside. The street below was a lake. Cars stuck halfway in the mud, trash cans floating like empty shells, tree branches scattered everywhere. People wandered barefoot through the water, their clothes torn, their faces pale. I walked down, pretending to be one of them, pretending to be shocked like everyone else. I asked questions, shook my head, whispered words of comfort. Nobody suspected me. Not yet. Clark stood outside his ruined home, his arms crossed, his face red. He shouted orders, trying to organize people, trying to act like the leader he thought he was. But his voice cracked. His power was gone, drowned with everything else. I stood there, watching him scream, and wondered if he knew. Did he know I had done it? Or did he think it was just nature, just a storm too strong to handle? As the day went on, trucks arrived. Rescue teams. News crews. Cameras pointed at the broken homes, reporters speaking with urgency about the unexpected flood. Microphones in faces, neighbors giving interviews, their voices trembling with shock. And I kept my mouth shut. Inside, though, I felt two fires burning. One of anger, still alive, still whispering that justice had been served. And one of guilt, hot and heavy, whispering that I had gone too far. That night, when I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that child again, clinging to the car, eyes wide with terror. And I asked myself, was revenge worth it? The fine was gone. The board was silent. Clark had no power left. I had one. But at what cost? I turned on my side, staring into the darkness, and thought about what the old man had said. Sometimes, the only way to show power is to let go. But now I wondered. Had I let go, or had I lost control completely? And now I want to ask you. If you had the power to destroy the very people who destroyed you, but innocent families would suffer too, would you still do it, or would you walk away? The neighborhood was never the same after that night. The flood had carved its scars deep into every street, every yard, every home. People walked around in boots, dragging out ruined furniture, throwing memories into piles on the sidewalks. The smell of damp wood and mud hung in the air like a heavy blanket. And me? I walked among them, silent, carrying the same broken look on my face that everyone else wore. Nobody pointed at me anymore. Nobody whispered. The name water hoarder was gone, replaced by a new one. Flood survivor. It was strange how quickly things can change. Clark tried to rally the neighborhood. He shouted about rebuilding, about fighting the insurance companies, about filing lawsuits. But no one listened to him anymore. His voice was drowned just like his house. People had lost trust in him. They didn't see a leader anymore, they saw a man who had built his whole life on rules that meant nothing when the water came. I stood across the street one day, watching him yell at a group of tired neighbors. His clothes were still damp, his face pale, his porch destroyed. He looked smaller than ever before. And deep inside, I felt something strange. Not victory. Not pride. But emptiness. Because even though I had brought him down, I had brought everyone else down with him. The news crews came back again and again. Cameras in my face, asking questions. How do you feel about the flood? What do you think caused it? Do you blame the HOA? I gave the same answer every time. A shrug. A sigh. Nature is stronger than all of us. And they nodded, wrote their notes, and moved on. But at night, when I was alone in my house, safe on higher ground, I couldn't escape the truth. It wasn't nature. It was me. I lay awake, listening to the quiet of a neighborhood that no longer slept peacefully. Sirens still wailed in the distance, trucks rumbled through the streets, and the faint sound of hammers echoed as people tried to rebuild. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it all over again. The water spilling over. The screams. The child clinging to the car. The guilt was heavy. It sat on my chest like a stone. But then, something else happened. A knock on my door. I opened it to find the old man. The same quiet neighbor who had seen me at the dam that night. He stood there with a lantern in his hand, his eyes sharp. "You did it, didn't you?" he said softly. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He didn't wait. He stepped inside, shut the door, and leaned close. I saw the water. I saw the way it hit. That wasn't just rain. That dam let go. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What are you going to do?" I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "Nothing." "You think anyone will believe me?" They all want someone to blame, but not the truth. The truth would break them. They need to believe it was just nature. Otherwise, they'll never sleep again. I stared at him, unsure if he was warning me or protecting me. Maybe both. He turned to leave, but before he stepped out, he said one last thing. You've got a choice now. You can live with what you did, or you can let it eat you alive. The door closed. I sank into my chair, his words circling in my mind. Live with it, or let it eat me alive. The days passed, and slowly the neighborhood began to patch itself back together. Houses cleaned, fences repaired, new grass planted. But the scars remained, not just in the streets, but in the people. They no longer trusted the HOA. The board collapsed, members resigning one by one. Clark himself stopped showing his face outside. His voice was gone. In a strange way. I had won. But it didn't feel like winning. Every smile I faked with a neighbor. Every nod I gave to a news crew. Every word I spoke about acts of nature. They all felt like lies stacked on top of each other. And yet, nobody suspected me. Nobody except the old man. One evening, I stood at my window, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. The neighborhood was quiet again, calmer, almost peaceful. Children rode bikes through the streets, splashing in the puddles that still lingered. Laughter returned, faint but real. And I wondered, was this what justice looked like? Or had I simply traded one kind of control for another? The HOA was gone. The fines were gone. The fear of letters and threats was gone. But a new fear had taken its place. The fear of my own hands, of what I had unleashed, of what I might be capable of again. The water had given me power. But power comes with a price. And now, as I sit here, telling you this story, I need to ask you something. If you held the kind of power that could destroy your enemies and free you from control, but it left you carrying a secret too heavy to bear, would you live with it quietly, or would you confess, no matter the cost? The nights were the hardest. When the streets were quiet, when the noise of hammers and chainsaws faded, when no one was outside dragging broken wood or ruined couches to the curb, that's when the silence crept in. And in that silence, the flood returned. Not outside. Not in the streets. But inside my head. I'd close my eyes and see it again, the water bursting through the gates, the walls trembling, the current swallowing everything. I'd hear the screams, the sound of glass shattering, wood breaking, cars crashing. And I'd see faces of neighbors I'd waved at for years, now screaming as their homes drowned. During the day, I walked around like everyone else. I picked up debris, helped carry boxes, even handed out food when the relief trucks came. People nodded at me, some even thanked me. They said, "We're lucky your house was on higher ground, you can help us rebuild." And I smiled, forced, shallow smiles. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't just a survivor. I was the reason they had to survive. The old man didn't speak of it again. He walked past me sometimes, gave me the same quiet nod, his eyes heavy with something between pity and respect. He was the only one who knew. And maybe that's why I feared him most. But he never told. Weeks passed. The HOA was gone completely. No more fines, no more rules, no more Clark standing on porches barking orders. Clark himself moved away not long after. His house stood half empty, a skeleton of what it once was, water stains climbing its walls like scars that would never fade. And for a while, I felt something close to peace. No more letters. No more meetings. No more chains around my neck. But peace is strange. Because when it came, it didn't feel the way I thought it would. Instead of relief, I felt a hollow space inside me. Like the water hadn't just drowned the neighborhood, it had drowned a part of me too. Every morning, I'd wake up, step outside, and look down at the dam. It still stood there, silent, calm, holding back what was left. Nobody went near it anymore. People whispered about it, called it cursed, called it dangerous. Kids stayed away. Parents warned them like it was a haunted place. But me, I couldn't stay away. I found myself walking to it often. Standing at the edge, staring at the lever, hearing the roar of water even when it was quiet. I'd place my hand on it, feeling the weight of what I had done. My reflection stared back from the surface of the water, eyes darker than I remembered, face older, more tired. And I asked myself again and again, was I a hero? Or was I the villain? Some neighbors treated me kindly, thanked me for small things, shared food, laughed with me at the end of long days. Others avoided me, their eyes darting away when we crossed paths. Maybe they didn't know for sure. Maybe they just felt something. Some kind of truth hiding in the shadows. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to scream it out. It was me. I opened the gates. I gave you this flood. But I didn't. Because once you let words out, you can't pull them back in. So I carried the secret, like a stone tied to my chest. Heavy. Suffocating. Sometimes at night, I wondered if justice had really been served. The HOA was gone, yes. The fines, the rules, the humiliation, gone. But at what cost? Families lost their homes. Children lost their toys. Memories washed away forever. I traded their control for my control. Their cruelty for my revenge. But was it worth it? One evening, I sat on my porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in red and gold. A child rode past on a rusty bike, waving at me with a smile. I waved back, but inside, my chest ached. That smile reminded me of the child I saw on the car that night, clinging, crying, alone in the flood. And I wondered, would that memory ever leave me? Or was it carved into me forever? The seasons changed. The water dried. Grass grew again where the flood once raged. New paint covered the scars on walls. But no paint could cover the scars inside me. Even now, years later, I walk past the dam sometimes. I see it sitting there, silent, heavy, dangerous. And I wonder if it's waiting for me. Waiting for my hand. Waiting for the moment I finally break again. Because once you've pulled the lever once, you never really forget the feeling. And maybe that's the real punishment. Not the fine. Not the HOA. Not the rules. But the memory of the water, and knowing that I was the one who let it go. So now I ask you. If you carried a secret this heavy, one that freed you but destroyed others, would you take it to your grave, or would you confess, no matter what it cost you?